do. Awesome, awesome. Don't be a stranger. Come and join us. We'd love to have you here. It's a blessing, isn't it? Awesome, awesome. So last week we decided we're going to wash each other's feet, remember? And the other, that means you're going to wash theirs and they're going to wash yours, correct? Right? Everybody, no matter who they are? Correct. So hopefully you've had opportunities in this past week to do so, because God always not only brings forth the message, but he also gives you little tests along the way, right? You had opportunities. So now this week we're going to break the mold. How about that? Okay, anybody ready for that one? All righty, good, okay. So what that means is you're going to come out of your mold, whatever mold that you have been in so far, so long through your life. Today's the day we break the mold. You ready? Yes. All right, awesome. Oh, somebody said let's do it. I love that kind of listener out there. Beautiful, awesome. Okay, so let's first of all, I suppose, let's turn to the book of Mark, shall we? And we're going to go to Mark chapter 2. And why I'm going to these particular scriptures is God and Jesus, through Jesus Christ, as Christ came on this earth and he ministered for the 3 years that he was in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas, Jesus was all about breaking people's mindsets, breaking what they believed and thought was true and teaching them new things. And he was all about upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, because he wasn't like the other religious leaders at all, was he? He didn't have the fancy robes, he didn't have all the little pomp and circumstance hat on, and he certainly just didn't stick in the synagogue, and he wasn't above the people, he was among the people. And of all things, he ministered to the lost. He ministered to the outcasts, the lepers, the tax collectors, the adulterers, the drunks, the people that were physically, emotionally, and spiritually and or sexually abused. He ministered to the least of the people. These were the poorest of the poor so often that he went and ministered to. And so he really upset the traditions of the religious people, because back in those days when Jesus was in the temple times, what would happen is the Pharisees would keep certain people out of the temple. In fact, there were various gates, as you've learned before, as to who went into what gate they could enter into, and there were courts. There were 3 separate courts that people could go to, and only the people that were the holy of holiest, the perfect ones, could go into the holy place and to minister to. They were the priests, and they would go into the altar area, and they would be the ones to minister through their sacrifices for the people. And all they would do basically was, sacrifice animals, and they would put the blood on the altar, and that was their ritual that they would do. And then they would never touch the people or go near the people. And so Jesus saw that, and God saw that, I'm sure, from the heavenly realms, because in Isaiah it speaks of the fact that so often people worship with their actions, sometimes their rituals, but their hearts are far away. And Jesus found that to be true, particularly of the religious leaders, because we know the Pharisees were often the ones that, I call them, they were like the principals, like the principal in school. They were the ones that they were like the hall monitors. Remember that when you were in school? I don't know if they have them today anymore. I think they have police officers there now, but needless to say, when I was a kid, if you were caught in the hall before class or during class, there used to be other kids that would be out there, and they used to have a little paper on them, and they'd write your name down. And then you'd hear your name over the loudspeaker. Joyce Stone to the principal's office. And so you'd go to the principal's office, and guess what I always was in trouble for? Talking, of course. You figured it out. You figured it out. I was always out there Cathying with somebody, kind of something, not paying attention to getting to class. So there I'd be there, and sure enough, you'd hear your name, and the whole class, like all the 30 kids, would turn. I was a Stone, so I was in the S's in the back of the room. So not only did you hear your name over the whole intercom throughout the school, but you also realized you had to come from the back of the room to the front of the room so the teacher could call you out and then say to you, "Were you talking again, Miss Stone?" Was I breathing? Yeah. What do you expect? Known behavior. It's not going to stop. Anyway, so then, so the whole class would snicker and laugh, and, you'd feel about this big, right? It was humiliating when you think about it. Thank God they changed the laws about that. But needless to say, you'd go to the principal's office, and guess what I used to have to write on the board 500 times? I will not talk in class or in the hallways. I will be on time for my next class. I will not. And see, the problem with I will not is the brain doesn't know the difference between the word not and the word, a positive affirmation. Like, for example, do not think of an elephant. Do not think of a yellow elephant. Do not think of a yellow elephant with a pink monkey on his back. Do not think about that. What are you thinking about? So you see, it was actually reverse psychology that these teachers were using on me. I will talk in class, and I will be on time for my next class. So you see, this is what the Pharisees were like. They were like the hall monitors who would catch you doing something wrong. Something wrong. And so we've been conditioned, even as little children, that so often many of us feel as though God also is watching us to catch us doing things wrong. And then we're always worried about, am I sinning? Am I sinning? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And before you know it, you start dwelling on what you're doing wrong and you try to change that, but you really can't, can you, within your own self? Or more importantly, you just feel smaller than what really schools are supposed to be designed to do, as well as churches. Churches are designed to help raise you up, to make you feel bigger, to help you understand that you're wonderful, beautifully, fantastic people, and you're awesomely made by God. And that we're here as a church not to look at the speck in your eye while we got the 2x4 on our own. We're here to lift you up and look at what you do right. And so you see, Jesus understood that. Now, he also recognized when people were in the wrong place, obviously. He found them in places that maybe they shouldn't be, correct? Right? And we're going to see that in Mark chapter 2, because what we see is Jesus is walking through, and this is early on in his ministry, he's walking through Galilee. And it says in Mark 2, verse 13, then when Jesus went out to the lakeshore again, and he taught the crowds that gathered around him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collection booth. So as Jesus is ministering to the entire crowd, he sees Levi. Now, Levi was a tax collector. That meant that he was most likely a deceptive, dishonest, sleazy person. Used car salesman probably comes to mind. So, that said, so this is the kind of man that Levi was. He was collecting taxes. Now, keep in mind, the Israelites and the Jews were under oppression by the Roman government. And they were overcharged very often for their taxes, particularly the poor people. The people that had the least often were asked to give the most. And sounds a little like American culture. But anyway, so the tax collectors, often what they would do is, if depending on how you looked and how you dressed, that would determine your tax for the day. So it made good sense not to look like you had much money on you, right? But see, if you were poor and you were on your way particularly to the synagogue, you might have your money for your offering. And so the tax collector, in order to see how it worked, was in order to get through town to town, they were essentially toll booths. You know, when you go over the Skyway, right, you have to pay a toll or they don't let you drive across. Or if you do drive through the little thing, when you don't pay, you get a nice little $100 fine on top of it all. But can you just imagine if, I think it's $1 to go across now? Or still $1, okay. So anyway, can you just imagine if you're driving up in your car and they take a look and they say, that'll be $7 for you, Eunice. That'll be $9 for you, since you come over every single day. I can get more money out of you more often. And, you know, it's only $1, right? So guess what the tax collector would do? $1 for the tax man and $8 for me. It was a get-rich-quick scheme. It's kind of, that's kind of how they operated. So you kind of, hopefully you're understanding the kind of character that Levi had. And he was also hated by the other people that would go through the toll booth, as you can well imagine. Now, Jesus is walking by. Now, he's got a crowd of people with him, and all his disciples are there as well. And he sees Levi in the tax collector booth. What do you think Jesus thinks to himself? He needs me. Now there's a man who, if no other person that's following me behind me, they might not have, as many sins as Levi does. And I better pay attention to him. And he also probably thought, I can use this man. Because here's the thing, if I take him out of that tax collector booth, and we all know this, that once you really, truly come into the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, and when you lay at his feet and truly allow him in to change all of your character, flaws, and defects, and all the things that are within you that are not quite right, the things that we and you and I all admit are sinful, because all of us have them, correct? We all do. We all fall short, every last one of us. We all need help. We all need a Savior. We need a miracle worker to change us, don't we? And, when God does change someone who is so bad, like that tax collector, Levi, does it not show that there's hope for you and me too? Is that not a testimony to others? Of course it is. So Jesus is walking down, and he sees Levi. And here's what he says. He says, come, be my disciple. Now, see, this is even more important that he asked Levi to become a disciple. Because remember, that meant that Levi, was going to not only learn from Jesus, be changed by Jesus, but then he would, as we know what happens to the disciples later, they would then become what? The apostles and the ministers to others. So listen, folks, if you happen to have the type of life right now, or parts of you or areas in your life that you feel that you really aren't measuring up to God, do you know what that means? There's hope for you. That means most likely God has an awesome ministry getting ready for you. Because if God only used the perfect and all the put together people, he could never use anybody, could he really? And he's certainly not interested in using hall monitors, because all they're doing is what? Pointing the finger at other people. They're never looking within themselves to say, how do I need to change? And so we see that Jesus chooses Levi to become a disciple. So here's what happens. Levi got up and followed him. And it sounds as though it was a pretty quick decision, doesn't it? See, sometimes in all of our walks, we spend a little too much time thinking about going to follow Jesus. Or we think about whether or not what we're trying to change in our life, how we're going to figure that out and how we're going to change it. Or maybe we've been predisposed and or taught that we're only supposed to be in this kind of mold. Anybody ever been told what you're supposed to be? What you could be? What you can't be, right? Have we not all been taught that somewhere, somehow, correct? The schools and the other religious places often are telling us who fits into a certain mold, right? Am I right? Of course. But see, what we're going to do today is what? Break the mold.